believed that the current Queen's death will be communicated internally with the not-so-secret phrase, "London Bridge is down." The Queen's private secretary first contacts the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, who will instruct their staff to communicate the news to the UK Foreign Office, which will then get in contact with the governments of the 52 members of the Commonwealth of Nations, mostly former British colonies. Next is when the news gets the, well, news. Every commercial radio station in the UK has what is called an obit light, a blue light triggered by a central office in London to give DJs a heads up that the news of the royal family member's death is on the way. They wouldn't yet know for certain that it's the Queen, but the protocol is still to switch to a pre-prepared playlist of somber music in anticipation of the announcement. The BBC, as the UK's public service broadcaster, gets its special heads up from an alert system that was originally created during the Cold War to warn of incoming missiles. Before the on-screen announcement, the presenter will switch to a black tie that the station keeps on hand specifically for this purpose. BBC One will show her portrait and play the national anthem. The network will then begin the ominous announcement. This is BBC Television News. Buckingham Palace has just announced the death of the Queen. Union Jacks will fly at half-mast out of respect, but by law, the royal standard must fly full because, by law, there is always a living monarch. TV networks have prepared for decades. Days of pre-recorded coverage of the life and death of the Queen have already been prepared. Different experts on the royal family have already signed exclusive contracts with certain networks to appear following the death. Sky TV and ITV regularly rehearse the death coverage, substituting the Queen's name with Mrs. Robinson. Other networks probably have too. All BBC comedy shows will go off-air during the 12-day mourning period. The death will be one of the greatest news events of the century. Airline pilots will announce the news to their passengers, London will nearly shut down, and an emergency meeting of Parliament will be called. So how much will the Queen's death cost? Under British law, the funeral for a reigning monarch is paid for entirely by the state. While we haven't seen a funeral for a reigning monarch in over 50 years, Princess Diana's funeral, viewed by over 2.5 billion people worldwide, had a direct cost of about $10 million, and that's just funeral expenses. The Bank of England has over 3.6 billion individual banknotes in circulation, each of which displays the image of the Queen. Each note costs about 5 cents to produce, so reminting the entire currency stock would cost close to $200 million. But the UK isn't the only country that would need to reprint their currency. Worldwide, there are a lot of countries with the Queen's image on their money. A conservative estimate of the cost to remint all those different currencies in all those different countries would be about $1 billion. Plus, both the date of the funeral and the date of the coronation of the new monarch would be declared national holidays in the UK, which each have an economic impact through lost productivity of $3 billion. The total cost for the Queen's death would therefore likely hover around $8 billion, a hefty bill for kicking the bucket.